Hey everybody, Plushie here, and finally, one day before the event ends, I'm going to make the second hot take of this event's new servants. I am so sorry, I've just not been working well at all with my sleep schedule. And of course, today's video is gonna be on Yui Shosetsu, and I'm just going to directly say it. She is, in my opinion, one of the strongest supports ever released in the game, and that is very impressive considering she is only a 4-star, and it's definitely a character worth trying to pick up if you do have a couple of spare quartz because of how much easier she is to acquire than a normal 5-star. Anyways, without further ado, let's get into today's topic on Yui Shosetsu and explain why I think she is so busted. So I'm not going to focus too much on her base stats because she's a support. Her offensive stats basically doesn't matter at all. She has a standard triple arts deck just like most good supports, and her arts cards aren't terribly awful. So yeah, she just gains her MP back relatively easily in a standard team with a lot of arts cards especially. And yeah, that's about it about her base stats. I don't think anything else is very special. Yui's first skill is a one-time 5-turn Guts that revives her with 3000 HP, a passive heal per turn effect for 5 turns that heals herself for 1000 every turn, and a one-time 3-turn debuff immunity, all on a 6-turn cooldown. So this is quite an interesting skill for a support. Obviously, this only benefits herself, but this is a very good sustain skill, and I quite like supports that can sustain themselves, so I don't really have to invest additional sort of protection just to have the support stay alive. The Guts being 5 turns is really nice because if you do lord this, it has a 6-turn cooldown, so you don't really have to worry the activation timing and worry about, oh, what if this runs out before I actually get to trigger the Guts. If it actually does, you just have to wait one more turn to have it up again. The heal per turn is very nice as well. It's basically almost a passive heal per turn effect on her, so it just gives her even more sustain because she herself is already a healer, so this is just extra layer of protection. And finally, the debuff immunity for one-time 3 turns is also very useful for a support, especially someone like her who wants to use her skills as well as her MP as often as possible, or at very key moments. Having this sort of extra layer of protection against disruption skills is very nice for a support. So I quite like this skill, even though this is basically her weakest skill out of all 3. Yui's second skill is an AoE 20 MP battery, a 30% MP damage up for the entire team for 3 turns, a star per turn generation effect for 3 turns that gives the team 15 stars every turn, and finally, an AoE 20% attack down for 3 turns on a 7-turn cooldown. So this is an insane skill, especially on a 4-star. Like, if you think about it, this is basically Oberon's first skill with 2 extra effects and extra cooldown. And it's not like you're gonna be using Oberon's first skill for 2 times in a normal match, because usually he's the finisher. So this is just a better Oberon skill 1, which is kind of insane to have on a 4-star. Team-wide 20 charge helps, obviously, the DPS as well as herself and another support. So for example, if you put her in a arts team and you have Castoria as your other support and an arts DPS, then yeah, this helps Castoria get her MP, herself get her MP, the DPS get her MP. So team-wide charge, very useful. The 30% MP damage up for 3 turn is also a very premium number, once again only seen on SSR supports most of the time, so this is super nice as well. 15 stars per turn for 3 turns is also such a big number. I feel like the only time we see 15 stars per turn for support is on Summer Scotty, who is a SSR support. So this is once again an SSR tier effect. And finally, it even has even more defense for your team, which is 20% attack down on all enemies for 3 turns. 20% is actually quite a nice number. Obviously, it's not going to help your team tank MPs or anything, but this is just a nice sort of damage reduction ability as a healing support. So overall, I think this skill is really, really nuts. This skill is just absolute SSR tier. It transcends SSR tier. If you put this skill on an SSR support, everybody's gonna call this like a very, very good skill still. So absolutely insane to see something like this on a 4-star. Yui's third skill is a targetable 30% arts up for 3 turns, as well as a 30% critical damage up for 3 turns, and finally it is a self 30 MP charge as well on a 6-turn cooldown. So this is yet another really solid support skill. Obviously, the first complaint people are going to have is, why isn't the 30 MP battery also targetable? Well, if it was targetable, she'd just be better than most SSR supports just on the skill set, which is, you know, not something that should happen for a 4-star, as well as, you know, we're not even talking about her MP, which is her most broken part, arguably. So yeah, this is sort of a limitation, I suppose, to only have her charge her own MP, but it's still very useful, once again, for a servant like Yui, whose main value actually lies in her MP buffs. This makes activating her MP very easy. You just need a 50 MP starting charge CE, or to pair her with another split charger like Castoria and have her pen at max, having basically 50 self-charge, combining her skill 2 and skill 3, means that, yeah, her MP is super accessible, which is very important in terms of her value. 30% targetable arts up as well as 30% targetable generic crit up is also very useful. Obviously very good on an arts servant, but also very good on a non-arts servant. The arts buff helps their MP gain on their arts cards, as well as help with triggering Yui's MP effect, which is arguably the most important part about this skill, actually. And the 30% crit up is generic, so once again, Yui sort of hints at the fact that even though on the surface she might seem like a arts crit support, in practice she is a universal support, which once again we will see even more when we look at her MP. But this is just a very solid support skill that also helps her get her MP easier, which is exactly what she needs. Yui's passives are pretty boring, just like Iori. You know, territory creation, 7% arts up, helps her get her MP back a little bit easier. Item construction gives her debuff chance up, helps her attack down on skill 2 a little bit more. Basically, none of these effects actually matter. If they don't exist, she completely functions the exact same, so yeah. And finally, Yui's MP is a very interesting one. It's an arts card type support MP that buffs the entire party depending on what card type buffs each member has on themselves. So if the member has a quick buff on them, they get a 20% to 30% attack up for 3 turns. If they have an arts up on them, they get a 30% to 50% critical damage up for 3 turns. And if they have a buster buff on them, they get a 20% to 30% MP damage up for 3 turns. It scales with MP level. And finally, the overcharge effect is a team-wide heal that scales from 3,000 all the way up to 7,000. So this MP is insane. Like, there's no question about it. Let's just look at its most underwhelming effect, which is the heal, right? I feel like for most people, they didn't roll this character for the heal, but her heal is actually on par with like the best healers in the game. The only team-wide heal, like direct heal, not heal per turn, that she loses to is post-buff Medea Lily. Everyone else, Nightingale heals as much as she does, you know, at MP1 versus her overcharge 1. Martha heals less than her. Tamamo heals less than her. Irisfield needs the heal boost to actually, you know, surpass her amount of heals, right? So in terms of a team-wide heal, this is actually one of the best ones. And because it scales with overcharge, if you use her in an arts team, she can easily heal the entire team for like 4,000 or even 5,000, which is like 1/3 to half of the max HP of your entire party. So this is a very strong heal, and the MP is actually relatively spammable. She has a triple arts deck with decent arts cards, and she also has essentially 50 self MP charge. So it's very reasonable to have this MP up relatively often. So even as a healer, she's not that bad, but basically nobody cares about her performance as a healer because everybody's focusing on how much offensive buffs she's able to dump onto a DPS, which is insane, by the way. So let's have a bit of a refresher, right? So if you have an MP1 Yui and you have a DPS that has all 3 color type buffs, she gives them 20% attack up for 3 turns, 30% crit up for 3 turns, and 20% MP damage up for 3 turns. When you add those numbers up on top of her already decent skill set, at MP1 and 1 use of her MP, she already is able to give a DPS 50% MP damage up, 20% attack up, 60% crit up, and 30% arts up, all for 3 turns. And let's not even count the art sub, because Yui is basically a universal support that isn't just restricted to supporting art servants. Obviously, I'm not trying to compare her to meta supports, but if you compare her to some other familiar faces in terms of raw damage boosting, she honestly matches or even surpasses a lot of other SSRs. So as we all know, both Merlins and Tamamo are used for stall, but very often they're also just used for damage boosting. Usually you use Merlin and Lady Avalon because they have a charisma, 20 MP charge, as well as a 50% card up, as well as 100% crit up for a single turn. But if you're using Oberon, sometimes you do pick Tamamo for extra damage buff just because of that 30% MP damage up being able to be doubled by Oberon. But then you take a look at Yui. Being able to provide a whopping 50% MP damage up means that when you pair it with Oberon, it gets flipped upwards to 100%. Yui has one of the highest amount of MP damage buffs that a single support can provide out of the entire roster. So once again, when you consider Oberon, I feel like she is just straight up unbeatable. And even without considering Oberon, 50% MP damage up in certain cases is going to be better damage boosts than a 50% card type up. Yui, of course, also has the 20% attack up to match the 2 Merlin's charisma, as well as a 3-turn 60% crit up, which in my opinion is superior to a 1-turn 100% crit up. And this isn't even considering using Yui's MP more than once. When that happens, her number obviously is going to skyrocket even more when compared to these 3 examples. Yui also compares extremely positively to some other supports where they mainly focus on buffing damage with their MPs. For example, Miss Crane. Miss Crane is able to give a DPS, 20% attack up, 30% MP damage up, and 50% crit up for 3 turns at MP 1. That is just straight up worse than the amount of buffs that Yui is able to provide. Another great example is Himiko. Himiko at MP 1, able to give the entire team 20% attack up, 30% buster up, and 50% crit up for 3 turns. That's also just straight up worse than Yui, even if we don't consider the 30% art sub on Yui. And of course, Himiko is also limited to only supporting buster-centric servants in order to reach her max potential. Obviously, there are other benefits on top of just the raw damage buff. I'm not trying to say who is, technically better, because obviously it really depends on their teammates as well as the situation at hand. But in terms of raw amount of damage buffs that a support is able to provide, Yui is definitely SSR tier and even transcends a lot of these staple units that people use as a tertiary damage support in challenge quests. So that is very impressive for a 4-star at just MP1. Of course, when Yui can already outclass so many of these SSR supports in terms of raw damage boosting just at MP1, there really isn't any 4-star supports that can hold a candle against her, other than maybe Santa Martha when she's specifically facing against Undead, Divine, or Demon. And obviously it is a lot harder to fulfill that specific condition compared to Yui's condition, which is just having all 3 color type buffs. It might be a little bit more difficult for an art servant to get all of these buffs, but of course the art servant has the added benefit of being able to take advantage of the 30% art sub. And if you are a non-art servant, you can simply run Summer Scotty, for example, and you would already have all 3 color type buffs on your main DPS. We will go into a little bit more about how to get these 3 color type buffs later in the video, but overall I think this MP is absolutely SSR tier. Very good amount of damage boosting even at MP1, competitive against SSR support units, and of course it also comes with a very decent heal. In terms of farming supporting, Yui isn't all that interesting because in most cases you don't actually want to use her MP in a farming comp, so she's only going to be exclusively an art support because her skills only buff arts, and she's going to be a side grade to Lady Avalon because they both have team-wide 20 MP charge, while Yui has 30% MP damage up and 30% arts up, and Lady Avalon has 20% attack up and 50% arts up, and also an overcharge boost. Basically, you never never use either of them until your Castoria is Bond 15 and you finally switch her out for either one of these. Lady Avalon is going to give a little bit more refund and also benefit servants that has a very strong overcharge, while Yui in general will function better with Oberon for damage because of that 30% MP damage up. One very interesting niche with Yui though is if you run a team consisting of one arts AoE, Yui Shosetsu, Castoria, and plug Oberon, then you can actually use Yui's MP on the final wave without even unlocking any of her pens, because she has 50 MP self-charge combining her skill 2 and skill 3, while Castoria has 30% AoE charge and Oberon has 20% AoE charge, so that's 50. So 50 plus 50 is 100. So Yui can use her MP on the final wave for extra damage boosting. And Oberon actually is able to give your arts DPS a buster up. So Yui's MP actually will give your DPS 20% more MP damage up, which is really nice with Oberon's skill 3 effect, which means that it will get doubled basically. So that is a very interesting niche, but definitely not strong enough for you to roll Yui just for farming. Maybe if you have someone like Durga, where they can benefit completely because they have their own rainbow, and you can justify this kind of team, but in most cases, I feel like people aren't rolling her for farming. In terms of Challenge Quest performance, I think Yui is absolutely insane. Her support skills has quality that is on par or even beyond a lot of SSR supports, especially that skill 2, team-wide 20 MP charge, 30% MP damage up, 15 star per turn for 3 turns, and AoE attack down all in one skill. That is better than most other SSR support skills, for example. And then she also has an MP that outperforms, at least in the offensive buffing category, most other supportive SSRs, as I mentioned when talking about her MP. So despite being a 4-star, she's actually competing to become one of the strongest supports ever in this game. All of that power, of course, does not come without a restriction, which is the fact that you need color type buffs on your DPS for Yui's MP to realize its full potential. This MP does not count any unremovable buffs, so none of the passives will count, nor will any boss gimmicks that give you card type ups count. And while I don't think getting 3 card type buffs on your DPS is actually that hard, this does bring up, in my opinion, Yui's only weakness, which is the fact that her MP technically has a skill cooldown. Basically, when you don't have any of your skills up, Yui's MP is just an AoE heal, and while the number is pretty serviceable, most people wouldn't be content just running an AoE heal in this day and age. There are ways to play around this. You can either stagger your skills, which means that you don't use all of your skills at once and you save your second support skills until your first support skills run out and then you finally use it. But obviously this doesn't work if you only have one source of color type buffer for Yui, but also you can just run a very offensive team where you try to kill off the enemy as fast as possible before you actually run out of color type buffs. You can even try to kill Yui off and make her buff a short-term thing where maybe she uses her MP twice very quickly and then she dies, and have a more sustainable support come up after her. Now, people are going to call me TA Brainrot for suggesting these two things, but honestly, I think building a offensive blitz type team is just another form of tactic. I kind of hate this notion where every time I'm building a team that is hyper offensive, it's TA Brainrot somehow, when it's a legit tactic, because the less time you linger against a boss, the less trouble it can potentially screw you over with RNG. But anyways, that's sort of a rant. I apologize. What I'm trying to say is that this is obviously a very real restriction, but you can also play around it by having smart team build or having smart skill timing. And even in the worst case scenario, Yui's sustainability through her skill 1 as well as her team-wide heal on her MP is able to keep her and your teammates alive until the next time all of their skills come back. So I don't really think this detracts from her value, and she is still amongst one of the strongest supports in the entire game. In the final section of this video, I want to briefly mention a couple of great combo units to use with Yui Shosetsu to provide all 3 color type buffs to trigger her MP. I'm not going to go through absolutely everything. I'm just going to go through stuff that I personally have experience with, and I bet there's going to be even more cool combos in the future with this servant, and if you have any that I didn't bring up, feel free to leave them in the comments. I really want to know. The first group of servants are servants that are able to straight up give all 3 color type buffs. These are going to be very important for your arts DPSs because arts DPSs generally have trouble finding all 3 color type buffs, because for Quick and Buster you have Summer Scotty, and also even if you don't use Summer Scotty, you just need to find 1 additional card type buff because Yui already gives you arts up. So if you're a Buster, you just have to look for a Quick up. If you're a Quick, you just have to look for a Buster up. It's not that hard. But for arts, you have to look for both Quick and Buster ups. These servants of course includes Ruler Da Vinci, Bakin, Chiron, and Helena. And I think as a pure support out of all of these, only Ruler Da Vinci is serviceable because she actually has decent buffs on top of the tricolor buff. I think Bakin should just use it on herself. Same goes with Chiron. Maybe if you want to go with more of a crit-centric build, you can use Chiron as a support, but I feel like most cases you just want to use Ruler Da Vinci. And Helena, although it is an AoE buff, she can help both herself and another DPS. Helena herself is quite a crappy DPS, so I don't recommend Helena either. The second category I already mentioned before is a singular servant. It's Summer Scotty. Summer Scotty is able to give the entire party Quick and Buster buff, so with Yui skill 3 added on, you already have all 3 color type buffs. This is also why people generally think Quick is the best card type to pair with Yui Shosetsu, at least in a challenge quest context. For Buster, of course, you can also just run Summer Scotty. Like, people already run Summer Scotty with Buster servants even before Yui Shosetsu. Now there's an even bigger reason to do so. So Summer Scotty, you know, without having to sacrifice power level and running a suboptimal support just to trigger Yui's MP, Summer Scotty is, in my opinion, the best partner for Yui Shosetsu. On top of these units, there are also a couple of interesting AoE double color type buffers that can also trigger Yui Shosetsu. So for example, you can use level 1 esports servants such as Summer Ishtar or Odysseus. Summer Ishtar also gives Quick and Buster buff, so she can function kind of like Summer Scotty, but she can die off and have your other supports come up. Odysseus actually provides a very interesting combo with a Quick and Arts double buff instead of a Quick and Buster double buff, so you can use him in a Buster team without including Summer Scotty and have him die off because he essentially acts as a taunt fodder at level 1 and have your actual Buster team come up. So those 2 units are pretty interesting. Takasugi is another quite interesting option because on top of giving a team-wide Buster and Quick up, he himself is a decent DPS, and he can also give Overcharge and give 1 target critical damage up and also cooldown reduction by 1. So if your comp specifically needs Overcharge and cooldown reduction, Takasugi can also be a great option with Yui Shosetsu. But I haven't experimented that much with these 3 options, so I'm just throwing these out. Servants are not the only source of color type buffs though. For example, Ox King is a great CE that can give the entire front line 3 turn worths of Buster buffs as soon as the wearer enters the field. So this is actually a great source of Buster up for Yui's MP. You can even run this in an arts team to trigger her MP damage up. For example, you can run it on Castoria, for example, and get that extra juice from Yui. So it's really nice. It's a very old welfare C that hasn't been rerun in like 6 or 7 years, so I don't even have it, but I really hope they rerun it. And if you happen to have Ox King, feel happy because its stocks got even higher because of Yui Shosetsu. For even more inconsistent memes, you can run the Ruler Artoria command code, which has a 1 in 3 chance to pick either one of the card buff types, and you can use that card first and then use Yui's MP and then use your DPS's MP or card in order to have that buff actually land. This is obviously very inconsistent and probably only ever gonna see play in specific min turns. On top of all those combos, of course, any servant that has inherent rainbow buffs work really well with Yui Shosetsu, such as Karen and Durga, especially ones with multiple turn lasting rainbow buffs, because you can use Yui's MP multiple times while that skill is up, but also in particular, servants that are able to get rainbow buffs on their MP work very well with Yui Shosetsu. Unfortunately, most of these only last for a single turn, so you have to use their MP and then Yui's MP. so you kind of missed out on the buff damage for a single turn, such as Ruler Artoria and Archer Ilia, but there are exceptions. So for example, Iori, which we brought up in the last hot take, has Buster and Quick buffs. Even though he doesn't have all of these buffs, he is able to get the MP damage up and the attack up from Yui whenever he wants, which is really nice. Another servant that people probably forgot about is Huang Fei Hu. He's actually able to get 3 turns worth of rainbow buffs on his MP. The number is small, so nobody liked it before, but now because of the existence of Yui, he essentially has an endless source of rainbow buffs to complement her MP, which is really cool to see a servant that people didn't really bat an eye about suddenly increase in power level because of the release of a interesting support. In conclusion, Yui is basically a 5-star. Now, I know I used that term quite a little bit too much recently. I said that about Iori, I said that about Summer Bavanshi, I even said that about Rider Liz, but all of them are DPSs at the end of the day, so their stats do matter. Their lower rarity does pose a penalty to their stats as DPSs. Yui is a support, so she absolutely does not care about her own stats, and her stats are more than enough to survive multiple turns on end, especially when considering her skill 1 effect, her skill 2 attack down, and her big heal on her MP. So absolutely, Yui is just a 5-star with a 4-star tag and a higher pull rate. As much as I hate calling things must rolls, I think Yui is pretty close to being a must roll because of how much value she provides as a 4-star servant. Without a doubt, she will be one of my most used servants in my Minturn comps, especially considering how good she is with Durga as well. You will be seeing her a lot in the future. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the video. I changed the script a bunch because I don't want it to be too long, but I also want to include as many tips as possible in terms of using Yui, so I apologize for the delay once again. This will make me not able to release Ushi Gozen's hot take before her banner ends, so I very much apologize, but I guess it's some kind of ironic justice that Yui's review destroyed Ushi Gozen's review in my timeline, but yeah. Anyways, I'll see you guys in the next one, and once again, good luck on pulling for Yui if you really want to go for her.